esteemed and diverse panel here, and I think the plan would be for the next 30 odd minutes to go deeper on customer experience and really try to figure out and unpeel what that means in the context of businesses today, e-commerce in particular. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Let me start off at the core. So, at the core of great customer experience, inevitably like great products. So, Naiyya, let me kick it off with you. Would love to know, as you delved into this space, what was that specific niche, what was that need gap in consumer experience that you experienced or saw, which prompted you to jump into the entrepreneurship journey and start something which didn't exist in the space before?
Sure. So it's fantastic being here, by the way. I think very interesting question because, I play two hats. I'm the founder of Baby Chakra, and that is my first venture. And now I'm the co-founder of the Glamm Group, which is a house of brands, a digital-first house of brands. I think with Baby Chakra, the answer was very simple, right? I mean, we are a land in India, which is completely changed the way families raise kids today, right? We are, 70% nuclear families. We're turning online in crazy numbers, 30% CAGR year on year in terms of how we look for parenting information online. It's one of the fastest growing categories, but there was no one platform that was giving you care in one place, right? So I think with Baby Chakra, the entire aim was we started with the content community play, became very rapidly one of the largest, most trusted platforms for parents to discover care through pregnancy and childcare and to also interact with doctors. And recently, we are one of the youngest D2C brands in the group. We launched our own range of products about 3 months back. We've completed the entire ecosystem there, the care community and the commerce ecosystem. And that is the need we serve, right? We believe parenting is a new journey. And when you're embarking on the journey, you need a partner to take you to that journey. And content, communities, and products, when interjected at the right times in a very hyper-personalized way, very relevant way, can have a disproportionate impact on your life and your well-being as a family. That's a Baby Chakra hypothesis. On the Good Glamm hypothesis, very interestingly, we actually co-create all our products with our users. So every month we have more than 550,000 people tell us their preferences, and that's a journey that started off with MyGlamm, where they would tell us what kind of lipsticks they wanted, what kind of shades they wanted, what kind of matte gloss finishes they wanted, and we'd go back to the drawing board and actually build these products out based on the survey results and based on the conversations we had from customers. So I think just to summarize, I think the DNA of listening to a consumer, partnering with them in that journey, and being hyper-relevant, hyper-personalized in that entire journey of content, communities, and commerce, I think it just made sense for us as a group and as founders from day zero.
Lovely. And very interesting, Naiyya, how you said that the scope of what you look at as core of the business is more than just the product or one particular service that you take to the consumer. It's about understanding their need and probably hand-holding them all the way through. And also the second part, I think, that you raised around being intimate with the consumer and helping them tell you what they want and then building on that. Suyash, I've heard you say that as well. So would love to get your perspectives on both. I think how you picked a very interesting space, a niche to get into. How was that journey like? And as you speak more about that, what in your perspective is the definition of customer experience today? So like Naiyya said, is it just the product or much broader than that? Is it the entire journey? And how have you then leveraged that thinking in how you built the business?
Actually, it's a very interesting question. So Anisha and me founded Dot & Key about 4-5 years ago. And the core of launching a brand, Dot & Key, was actually customer experience. Because what we realized trotting the world was that once we came back to India, we couldn't find products that we loved. So, every time we used to travel abroad, Anisha used to hoard a lot of products. And then coming back to India, when that used to run out, we used to plan a next holiday to go and get that, right? So we realized that the product experience is really important for a consumer, and that actually makes them make the buying decision. So once we got back here, I studied abroad for 5 years. Anisha studied abroad as well. And we got here and we realized that we need to give our consumers that experience that we got abroad. So this entire concept of building Dot & Key started from the concept of really giving the consumer that experience that other countries gave, that global brands gave, that India lacked. And I think that was the pillar stone of why we started Dot & Key as a brand. And I think moving forward for your question about what does customer journey mean for me, I personally feel the customer journey starts, like consumer experience journey starts from the inception of the product. Like, when you're thinking about the product, what product to make, like what should go in there. In our case, what fragrance, what color, what texture, what benefit you're trying to give the consumer, all the way to where they're learning about the product, where they are getting educated about the product, where they are discovering the product, to actually delivering the product in the consumer's hand and going up to the life cycle of the product till the consumer has finished the product. So this entire journey has to be mapped, keeping the customer experience in mind. And for me, customer experience starts from inception to the end of the life cycle of the product.
Thank you. Kunal, I'd love to shift gears to you. I know you've mentioned that customer experience is very core to how you run the business, and would like to also touch upon increasing access that consumers have to brands today, right? It's no more some entity at the back end. You are talking and conversing with the brand every day in very real ways. So how has that phenomena influenced how you think about where to invest, how you think about what the next phase of growth for the business should look like?
So I think there are a few parts to that, right? So I think the basic principle that we operate with is that you have to be where the consumer is, right? And the way we've seen things evolve, obviously thanks to the online revolution that has happened with all the marketplaces and the D2C boom, we are also seeing that increasingly the consumer segments that operate across these distribution channels are different. So what that means is, while there's a little bit of an overlap, but there are sizable segments which work independently from each other across channels, right? So the offline consumer has a different profile, the online consumer has a different profile, and within online as well, consumers buying from Flipkart probably is slightly different from the one who's buying from Nykaa. So how we operate today is that we are slowly starting to build a definition of these consumer profiles and solve for the right consumer experience for each of them, right? So it's less about consistency across channels, but it's more about what is the best experience for the consumers on this channel. So that is how we basically operate.
Understood. And you also bring up an interesting point around how distribution has evolved in many ways, right? Like many years ago, it would all be about what the offline experience is, potentially not in control of the brands. It's probably dependent on the last point or the retailer. I think with proliferation of platforms and many other e-commerce channels that are now available, how do you navigate that? How do you maintain consistency for a brand when you want to deliver a uniform consumer experience to them across these myriad of distribution channels? Would love to get your perspective. And Chirag, I know you work deeply in the space, so would love to hear your perspectives on that as well.
Sure, thank you. I think, and you put it rightly, that we have moved from a world where offline brands were there, and the last leg of sales would be done by retailers and distributors. So brands don't end up owning the consumers, and hence the consumer experience. What has happened, and especially with the burgeoning growth of e-commerce and D2C, is that brands have started to own the experience right from discovery to selection to then conversion and retention. And it's a very different muscle to be built as compared to if you look at traditional CPG brands. And I can go on this one, that how do you look at different cohorts, different experiences, and it's a very different muscle to be built. Once you start to look at owning the consumer from discovery, how do they come, how do they react, what kind of matrices to be measured, which will lead to better experiences. But I think the big change is that brands are now they have to own the consumer experience, and which also is very beneficial when they have to build out newer products, right? This gives so many insights about who is repeating, who is the multiple time repeater, hence a loyalist, and what she said, that those are the people who we need to go back to and ask that what do you need more, what are we not able to provide. So that's how I think the consumer experience has changed drastically from the way it's handled.
Kunal, would love to have you come in as well.
Sure. So I think what Chirag mentioned rightly, I think you have to build different muscles. I think for the longest time, the CPG muscle has been the distribution muscle, which was very tough to beat. Like thinking of a new age brand in that era when it was only the offline business was very, very tough. So thanks to the online boom and the D2C boom, those challenges no longer exist. There are some other challenges, of course, but access to consumers is no longer a problem. I think the question is, do you have a meaningful proposition or not? And so, yeah, I think back to your question about how do we navigate, I think, as I said before, we think of each distribution channel as a different consumer segment to a large degree. And we make it a point that we win market share in each of those channels. We don't look at the holistic picture alone. We look at channel level profitability, we look at channel level market share, we look at channel level portfolios, we look at the right consumer experience by channel to make sure, so that includes how good is the delivery times, how good is the search experience, all of it, right? So you have to design ecosystems around each of them, right? And for smaller brands, obviously, you have to put in more hard work because you are fighting incumbents who've been around for very, very long, who have a very powerful brand strength. So you want to make sure that you capture every single opportunity to make a difference to a consumer's life, for the consumer to be able to say, hey, I love this brand because it did X or it did Y. So those are some things that we keep in mind as we navigate this ecosystem. So to cut it short, I'd rather think of it as an opportunity than a problem to build the brand.
It's very interesting you say that, and I want to delve deeper on a few things you mentioned. And just reference for the audience as well, I think as we were speaking earlier in the speakers lounge, one consistent theme I picked up was, I think all four of them here thought that doing all that was just articulated is just the way to go. It's not a choice. It's not about trading one option versus the other. It's not about focusing on product or focusing on customer experience. It's actually in many ways doing all of this together and doing all of it well. And that brings me to the question that obviously makes building this business way more complex than it has ever been before. Naiyya, I'd love to hear from you as you started Baby Chakra. You built the entire pipe, you built the entire engine. So, of course, the philosophy of holding the customer through an entire episode or some life stage is something that would resonate strongly with them. So I can see how that would lead to loyal customers, a lot of stickiness. What does it take to think about all those problems in parallel, and how do you then think about building the business differently, or what capabilities do you think are now core to consumer product companies that erstwhile used to be maybe just distribution or sales?
So it's a super question. I don't think I can answer all of it, but I'll try and answer parts of it. I think, again, with the Baby Chakra experience, the whole journey started with content and communities, right? So I think one of the biggest problems that brands face, especially in very high trust categories like mom and baby, is how do you build trust? And I think what ended up happening was, because of course we put in a lot of time and effort and a lot of, I think, energy into building out a very high trust play on the content and community side. When we launched our products, which we did right now, it was quite startling and also extremely encouraging to see how the response to these products was, right? We've gone on to become bestsellers in a couple of categories already in 3 months of launch in third-party marketplaces. I'm not talking only about our D2C platform, right? Which is, in a way, what people would say is an objective measure, right? I think the second thing that really worked for us, and I think that's not just something that we built out, I would say it's credit to the group, and I would say to the Glamm PopX or partnership, was the entire journey of content to commerce, right? I think the biggest challenge is, yes, of course, you might have eyeballs, but do you have a high converting customer, right? And even in getting eyeballs, by the way, it's extremely expensive. So if you look at, I keep on asking my team this, what happens tomorrow if, let's say, we're not able to advertise on Facebook, on Google? What happens to our sales, right? What happens to our visibility? What happens to our brand? And I think the answer that we've come out with there is that the content lever, the community lever, the creators lever that we have, and the data stacks that power it all is extremely powerful. And when you couple that with a very high performing conversion engine, right, which is the product journeys you see on our platform, the CRM journeys, the customer experience journeys, etc., right, the replenishment, repeat, cross-sell, upsell journeys, the entire sort of stack we built out in the warehouse end to sort of predict our stock inventory levels, etc., right, to really sort of plan all that entire stack. That, I think, is a plug and play that now we're experiencing at Baby Chakra that we kind of lever with our other brands that we brought into the portfolio. So I think, yes, it's maybe there is a journey of trust that brands have to do. There's a journey of optimizing and efficiency brands have to do. And there's a journey of high conversions and converting funnels that brands have to build, right? When these three things come together, then magic happens. And I think some of these are plug and plays. Some of these are partnerships. Some of them take inordinate time to build out. But I think that's really where the moats lie for companies such as ours.
Makes sense. I want to go deeper on the D2C space as well. And Chirag, I know you power a lot of that for brands that you work with. So before the magic happens, like Naiyya said, there's, I'm sure, a lot of blood and toil that goes into getting to that critical scale where things start to, operate together and the flywheel takes off. What is critical for nascent brands as they think about consumer experience, especially as they try to build channels directly with the customer?
I think interesting question, and I think what she said that in shopping experience, trust is a key factor. And when you are a nascent brand, how do you get that trust going? I think where we also come in is that we are in the business of in some way democratizing the trust. That how can we give you that initial lever, which gives you, which let's say some of these groups or some of these large scaled up brands have built muscle over time. Can we democratize that part of shopping experience? Whether it is in form of reducing frauds, or whether it is increasing prepaids, or whether it is building more ratings and reviews, let's say in a very organic way. We power all of that, and I think that's what a nascent brand needs to, let's say, go to a space where they are confident of, using more heavier products, thinking about product market fit is there or not. So that's how at least we are adding value, and we see a lot of e-commerce enablement companies trying to provide, at least make it easier for newer brands to come in and solve for that trust and initial capital cost as well.
Got it. Suyash, you are also a big believer. I know you have a strong point of view on why D2C is important as brands think about their evolution. How have you made it work for you? Like, what has been great about the D2C channel that other distribution channels fall short on?
I think for me, the single reason why D2C works is because of the brand experience. For every other distribution channel, like you have to tailor yourself to the channel, and the channel doesn't tailor themselves for you. And D2C is the only place where the consumer can come to your brand website, tailored for them, communicating the brand and what the brand stands for, and really seeing only the brand. So it's like an exclusive experience. It's like going to an exclusive store. For example, if you go into a Louis Vuitton store, so that's an exclusive store that's been built. So like that, an exclusive store has been built for your brand online for your consumer. So I think, first of all, they're captured for you. The consumer is only seeing your brand. Second, the emotion is much deeper with the brand, so the connection is much better. Third, I think the product education, which ultimately needs to drive sales, is much better on a D2C. Obviously, a couple of more points which are key to customer experiences. One, because you have customer data, you can actually reach out to them and really get to know what they are thinking about your brand and what's working and what's not. So I think this direct conversation with your consumer becomes really critical for long-term growth and building a sustainable consumer brand. And I feel that D2C is the only way where you can do this. So you start with D2C and then you go through all the other channels to grow your brand, and that's what my suggestion to new founders would be.
Great. What you articulated is what potentially a brand can, get out of D2C. What can a consumer, expect to get out of D2C? And what I mean by that is, in a day and age where Amazon promises you next day delivery, there is evolved search, in many cases image-based, contextualized. How do D2C channels keep up with what is the UI UX, the literally on-app, on-website experience that marketplaces can provide? And of course, they are investing way more capital into it. They are solving for many more use cases that a single brand can solve for. Does it ever play on your mind that the experience on the D2C channel might be suboptimal to marketplaces or other channels? And has that ever been a trade-off in customer experience?
I think it's a great question. So I think we all know where there is plenty, there's always an offering available. Like, for example, an Amazon had to build the entire tech infra on their own because they were market creators. So for them, creating it was a long and tedious journey. For us, luckily, like for example, Dot & Key is on Shopify Plus. So Shopify Plus is a platform which is pre-made, seamless, because lakhs of sellers are actually selling through the platform. So a lot of tech hassles have been reduced for us. For example, a lot of tech stack is people like Chirag actually help us in easing our entire process and the customer journey through our website, because a lot of softwares and plugins are available for platforms like us, because we are lakhs of us, we're just not a few, we are a lot of us. So I think having said that, yes, it's very difficult starting and when the ecosystem is not robust enough. But as you move forward and the ecosystem matures, you probably have way more benefits being nimble and small and your own website than probably the larger players like Amazon and Flipkart. So, being nimble helps in the longer term, and it's much better for the consumers as well.
Fair. Chirag, as you help brands, what is this evolution like? Like, what use cases are critical to a consumer journey as you think about building out your D2C channel, and where maybe there is an expectation of hygiene as you experience the channel, and then what could be some areas of delight where brand loyalty can really embed in the consumer's mind?
I think the answer varies depending on what stage the brand is in. If it's a pre-PMF stage, then the needs are very different. Whereas if you have achieved certain amount of PMF, you have raised funding, you have some money in the bank, then you're chasing different goals. And depending on that, you would look at whether, you would, for example, what he said, if I'm in a pre-PMF zone, I would look at innovative features day one. And just because, they can't afford a technology team day one. Hence, you would need enablers or new softwares to come in who can marginalize the fixed cost. Whereas if you have achieved PMF, then you would look at more efficiency over innovation. So you would look at anyone who can fasten the conversion journey, who can help build more repeat cohorts. So that's how it starts to differentiate. And for hyperscaler brands, of course, both become important because then you have achieved some amount of efficiency scale also, and you would want to continue on the innovation journey. Yeah, that's how at least I think.
Makes sense. So one thing that is very evident is till you reach a certain fairly large scale, the journey requires a lot of investment of capital, resources, mind space, I'm sure. Kunal, I'd love to check with you if you are on the same page in terms of the choice within a business between marketplaces and D2C, because of course there are trade-offs on profitability, there are trade-offs on customer experience, as Suyash highlighted, on both sides. So as you think about where to deploy resources and capital, how do you make the choice between the role that D2C needs to play in your portfolio versus probably the stability that existing marketplaces can offer?
Sure. So I think the context is also quite different for us as a category, because in our category there are already vertical specific marketplaces, right? Like maybe these vertical specific marketplaces don't exist for probably say electronics for that matter. So a large part of the consumer experience problems have already been solved. Why am I talking about this? Because I'm going back to the point about are there big challenges with marketplaces? And I think I would say largely the consumer experience problems, at least for my category, have been taken up as a problem statement for these marketplaces, and they are getting resolved. In fact, it has gone to a level where consumers' first choice is to walk into these marketplaces, look at what are the new offerings, etc. So they've become discovery platforms in a way, not just I want this, I order it, it comes tomorrow. So that's the context. Now, in terms of the role of D2C, I think as we spoke about, that as when you're a small brand, you don't want to leave any opportunity out there. And D2C is therefore one such muscle that we've built, which has helped us improve our not only just our digital presence, but overall, the entire digital marketing system, the influencer community, the content to business piece. So all of that has actually happened because of the D2C business. Like even when you think about the talent pool that you hire for an e-commerce team, is very, very different from the folks that you hire to build a D2C team. Like these guys are generally, what we call them as growth hackers, right? So you're constantly looking for opportunities. So as I was talking previously, our social media, our Instagram handle today has more than close to 1 million or like 800,000 followers, roughly around that, which is more than many beauty magazines today in the country. So what does that mean? That we've also become a platform where people are coming to consume content around makeup, right? And that's the perfect place for them to discover the brand. And all of this has actually happened because we started off with D2C. And it's very closely integrated with that, while it also has benefits on other marketplace channels. So for me, the role of D2C is very important because it's helped strengthen our D2C presence. And as brands become more specialized, needs become more specialized, your presence on digital channels becomes key. So from that standpoint, it's a no miss. You have to be present. But from a capital allocation, the way I operate at it is that we'd like to be as close to to profitability as possible for all our channels. And there is definitely a challenge on D2C at this point. So that's where we operate. So we have guardrails that we operate with. So while marketplaces generate sizable revenue as well as profitability, D2C is again helping us build new muscles. And there are a lot of other intangible benefits around consumer research, product testing. Like you can constantly, like within the same day, you can test 10 different concepts. You can iterate so many times. So your product development piece becomes far more robust than in the older times when you would just outsource it to a research firm. They will come back in a month later, and then you will, sorry, not a month later, but okay, let's say sooner. But again, you know, the iterations have become much faster. So there are a lot of other benefits of having D2C. So the key is to just have those guardrails defined.
I just wanted to add to what he said, that D2C, at least what we have seen, brands which have experimented first on D2C and then on marketplaces have higher rates of success, and this is data backed. And the reason, at least what he was saying, is that you can iterate faster. It's more data. In marketplaces, you typically won't get a lot of data. Hence, the experimentation of finding out which audience is working for you, which ads are working for you, which product offering is working for you, is not to the tune of our digital world today. So we have seen at least D2C brands starting and finding PMF first on D2C, and then opening up more channels, getting to know that what regions work for them, even going offline first prior to marketplaces. All of that has worked, but intelligence first, followed by what channels to operate.
I just want to add to that. I think I was sharing with you earlier, Navneet, as well. If you look at some of the DRHPs that are coming out, right, especially for consumer brands, I think one of the big, listen, I think every brand has to go their own journey, and I think marketplaces are fantastic allies, certainly to us as well as the group. But I think if you look at the fact that marketplaces kind of own the data, one of the big risk factors that some of these DRHPs have called out, right, is that we don't have that data. We don't own the consumer. 87% of our business actually comes from third-party marketplaces. So I think just at a certain scale or on a certain journey for a certain brand, it actually is a de-risking factor as well in some ways, right? Because when you're owning the consumer, if you talk to investors, right, they'll say that if the brand is completely built on marketplaces, even simple things like retention cohorts, right, replenishment cohorts, etc., can be a bit of a black box. So I think it depends. I think it goes back to what Kunal said, right? You have to be where the consumer is. So if the consumer is on marketplaces, you have to be on marketplaces. But there's certainly an extremely important, business case and also risk mitigation case to be made for D2C as a platform just by itself, apart from all the amazing points about consumer insights.
Just one more point. You know, the other play where D2C is quite interesting is because in that structure, there is no retailer margin, nothing, right? So what that means is you can make your products really very, very affordable for the consumer, right? Obviously, there's a problem of discovery, but I'm sure there will be categories where that unit economics works perfectly well, right? Let's say a high value product where you can completely cut down the margin structure and the shipping cost is just 40 rupees, 50 rupees. Imagine the benefit the consumer can get because he can certainly buy the same product at a much cheaper rate. So I think that evolution is probably already happening, which is beneficial to the consumer.
No, for sure. I think we've all well established that D2C is here to stay. One other aspect I'd love to touch upon is with so many channels available to engage with the consumer, discover what the consumer wants. What are some interesting strategies you have deployed? Because in order to compete with large FMCG companies who have very efficient cost structures, you all alluded to innovating on many different dimensions to reach the consumer, to iterate faster, be more agile in how you respond to consumer needs. Would love to hear some anecdotes, whether that be, acquiring customers or retaining them or building loyalty or even launching new products that you've all sort of built on the back of a direct channel to the consumer, whether social or D2C.
I'm happy to go, and I'll be leaving and late for my flight. I want to talk about the role of, so of course, I think the content creator story is well shared and I think well understood by all here. I think the bet that we're also looking at is the community journeys, right? I mean, if you just think about Lego, right? Lego is what? It's basically plastic bricks, right? But there is this crazy, I think, evangelism that Lego customers do. And, there are Lego clubs and Lego meetups and, people who prefer Lego over any other plastic colored brick out there. And I think the future, as I see it, Navneet, is that communities are the future for brands. And communities in a bit very differentiated way from what we understand today communities to be, right? Everyone, people like, oh, I'm on Instagram and I have a community. That is a great channel. It's a great audience, right? You analogize it to a magazine. I think it's a fab analogy, right? An inspirational magazine. But I think communities is where people will come together and become actual evangelists and flag bearers of your brand. And communities are my big bet on what will help brands from not becoming commodities. So I think that's my big sort of bet for the future. We'll see how it plays out.
No, well said, Naiyya, well said. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sure, so I'll go next. So I think your question is, how do we differentiate ourselves from the large incumbent brands?
And how have you actually leveraged this direct engagement with the consumer that incumbents have not had for decades, right? Like you're hearing them on social media, you're getting feedback from them directly. And has that been a way in which you have been able to create some competitive advantage?
So first of all, let me clarify. I think the incumbents are really smart. I think they are also trying to fire all engines. So it's a tough market out there. I can only talk about my category. So I think for us in our category, we have incumbents who either are global brands, where probably India is not the primary design market, or they are multi-brand portfolios, right, where they have set structures around sales, marketing, all of that. And that's where I think we found our gaps. Like you've already covered these points, but we are able to identify need gaps very quickly. Right, really quickly, and we are super agile, so that we don't miss out any opportunities. It's tough to fight them on the traditional sales structure, but like for our business in cosmetics, makeup, most of the selling happens via assisted selling. That is, there is a beauty advisor who helps you try out different lipsticks, who helps you figure out the right foundation shade. And what we realized very early on is that that's not a strength most FMCG brands have, which is how to leverage assisted staff. And which is where we've gone crazy. We've gone crazy deep into the CRM of that staff, into observing performance of each of them, hiring them, to like almost to an obsessive level, right? And that's been our strength. We are now the #1 brand in many states, which is a very strong footing to have. So that's all happened because we found this opportunity that assisted selling happens. So if we just focus on the assisted selling staff, we can create so much more value, and the ROI is infinite, right? You're not really, it's mind space investment essentially. So these are the opportunities we found. Innovation is one. The online, as I said, is a equal footing play field where all brands can access. So we've gone again crazy deep into differentiating online channels within online channels, understanding what works in one channel versus the other, leveraging D2C insights, being super present on digital channels, targeting as much as possible, building the content machinery as much as we can. So all these things have helped us. And I think most importantly, crafting a very clear product proposition is also super important. This is all the delivery mechanism that we spoke of. But at the heart of it, how do you fight an incumbent is via a proposition that truly differentiates, right? I mean, back in the day, there used to be one cream moisturizer for all needs, right? Now you have, I don't know, 10, 15 different types of moisturizers. So needs have become specialized. That's because the economics is now supportable thanks to e-commerce. So then in this changing ecosystem, you need to find your winning proposition that beats the incumbent's proposition and create a place for you.
Yep. Great. I know we are almost at the hour. So one last round, parting thoughts on how do you embed customer experience thinking into the organizations that you lead? How do you make sure that not just you, but every employee in the organization is putting consumer at the heart of all the decisions they take and how they do go about their everyday jobs?
I think just one simple thing: make every team member of yours talk to a customer once a month. I think this simple task, when it's put to them and when they talk to the customer and the passion they hear from the customer about the products that they have helped build, I think that single thought really transformed the entire approach towards consumers and the brand.
If I have to add just 2 points to that, one is what has worked for me is behavior change from the top, right? So when the leadership constantly asks for consumer first questions, the team knows what to expect, right? And they start thinking about that. So driving that thinking from the top helps, making sure all business reviews talk about them. And then where possible, break the consumer experience or the consumer problems into buckets. Like a very simple thing for us, given our vast portfolio because of the shades problem, availability is such a big driver, which is so basic, right? But we always bring the conversation to start with that, right? So break the CX down into multiple buckets, right? So availability, shopping experience, etc., etc. And that helps the team also think through, okay, I need to just check off these 5, 6 boxes and work with them. And I totally agree. I think immersion is by far the best way to gather insights and brand problems.
While prescriptively, I think what he's saying closer to the consumer works. I think it's a little different for us, wherein we have a paying consumer, which are merchants, and whereas the end consumer, which is using. So we have to take care of both of them. While they pay, so how do we take care of their needs? And I think what has worked for us is that, of course, staying close to the merchant works, but then also differentiating that what customer anecdote is. Is this a real problem or is that a symptom of a bigger thing? And then going deeper and solving for them. And keeping a very, very close eye on solving problems at source rather than solving symptoms, because otherwise they'll keep happening again. And we have seen that if you solve problems and if those are symptoms, that also lead to dissatisfaction of merchants, because that problem will come back again in a month or it will come back in another form. Hence, solving problems at the real goal will keep the merchants and consumer happy. And hence, they keep coming back to us and giving us feedback also. So that has worked for us.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Lovely set of perspectives today. Very insightful discussion. Thank you so much for making the time.